Welcome to my inaugural podcast recording. And it's called From My Experience. And so firstly, I'll explain a little bit about that. But firstly, I actually wanted to ask you, welcome, Patrycyja Mochocka. Is that how I pronounce your name properly?
Patrycyja Mochocka.
Mochocka. Okay, cool.
Yes.
And do you prefer to be called like the South African version, Patricia, or how do you prefer to be referred to?
I prefer if people call me P, if they don't want to say Patrycyja. I just basically say you can call me anything but Pat.
Okay,
I
you
hate
don't
Pat. Don't call me Pat. You can call me Susan. I will respond, but don't call me Pat.
So say again, what's the short version?
Just P.
Oh, just P. Oh, okay, cool. Okay,
Yeah.
P. No problem. Yeah, no. Okay, good. And so this, I wanted to kind of, I've been thinking about doing like podcasts for a very long time, for about, as is my want, usually like 4 or 5 years. So
Wow.
only getting to it now. And well, actually like pushing myself to do something a little bit differently. And because I was listening to quite a few podcasts, so even a little bit before the whole COVID thing started, and I was like, sure, you know, I love listening to podcasts because it affords me the ability to then, you know, wash the dishes or even do some stretching or go for a walk, and I can still listen to stuff instead of having to sit down and read things. So I consume a lot of podcast information because I'm interested in a lot of things and I want to hear about a lot of things, but I can't. It feels, you know, in this day and age of being overstimulated, it feels like a waste of time to sit down and just read something. I feel like I need to go for a walk and I want to listen to something and it needs to be productive and blah, 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 blah. Okay. So that's why I've like kind of been really interested in podcasts. And then I kept finding a lot of information or looking for information about the things that interest me, but it's always very much like US based. So there's a lot of like information coming out of the US. Maybe that's where a lot of, let's say, medical or scientific information comes from, seems to come from not local expertise. And so, and then I got really irritated sometimes with listening to podcasts by women because I wanted to hear from a woman's perspective about, especially about things around health, etc. And I was listening to these podcasts about with all these American women talking, and it felt it felt still a little bit divorced and foreign from me and my experience in maybe a South African context. Okay. And like what we have available to us here. Because I think that like your environment plays quite a big role in how you experience things, how you deal with things, like what we have available to us in terms of like medical support or, you know, knowledge from a local point of view. So
100%.
at that time, I think I mentioned this to you before in like casual conversation, that you had been doing some retreats and you were teaching yoga stuff for, you know, for teachers only retreats, that kind of thing, I think down at Pumula in the South Coast. And then you had one specifically about autoimmune. And I obviously know you through well, the salsa theme scene actually, I think, was where I actually first got to know you, even though we both sort of in the yoga world as well. And so my interest is in how to work with, from my experience in yoga through movement modalities, through my own experience, through my body and my lived experience. And yeah, I wanted to kind of start to talk to people who can share like the experiences that they've had, you know, in their experience, from what they've learned from going through certain things. And so you'd done this thing about autoimmune, and I was like, oh, I wish I could come. And it just was, the timing wasn't right. And of course, you know, work versus time off and, you know, the cost of coming down for a retreat. And I was like, well, I'd love to sort of speak to you and find out more about what what it's about, what's been your experience, what's been your journey. So I'm interested in this intersection between movement, the experience in movement and movement modalities and philosophy of yoga, and how autoimmune came into all of that for you. And it seems, from what I see, obviously because I follow you on Instagram, you've also shifted a little bit away from the yoga side and a little bit more into the mental belief systems, core wounding kind of stuff. So that is where my interest comes from. I want to learn from other people's experience, and I want it to be valid, local experience. So
yes, 100%. We can relate so much better to people who are in the same environment where we are in, because we experience similar things. Like in South Africa, women experience a certain amount of stress around safety that I don't think women in other countries might experience. So, and that plays a vital role in our health and our mental health and how we conduct ourselves, how we live our lives, the freedom that we have or don't have. So I can fully understand where you're coming from. And also, I think there is such great power in storytelling. I think through my recovery, through my various stages of whether it's trauma or eating disorders or relationship issues, I really appreciate people sharing vulnerably about their story, because there's one thing about just reading material about how to heal or what the steps are to heal, but really understanding and hearing from somebody else's mouth. I was there, this is what I did, and this is where I am now, and this is where I'm going. It gives people a lot of hope. Well, it gives me a lot of hope to hear these stories. So I think there is tremendous power in vulnerable sharing. And I think in this age of technology, we see the highlight reels of everybody else's life, but we don't really see what the struggles are and how they actually get through those struggles. So I think there is this huge craving for vulnerability, for realness. Even on this new platform that Instagram has brought out, the Threads, I can see how that whole community just wants reality. They want to connect on a much deeper level. And as we're going through this technology age, we on the one hand we're becoming more connected, on the other hand we're becoming more disconnected. So I really appreciate what you're doing, because through this platform or this way of sharing, you're creating a deeper connection, which is basically, yoga is all about that connection. So I think this is a great idea, and thank you so much for having me on.
yeah, so I mean, feel free to share what parts of your journey you willing to share. Like you say, I think it is this like need for vulnerability. I mean, for my own journey, I've always moved through, and you might share some of my experience as well. I've moved through issues with back pain and disc degeneration and all the related joint and connective tissue issues that pushed me into the movement sphere to actually explore how to like manage my pain and work with and improve my physical condition through movement. And in later years now, have started understanding more actually how I'm affected by autoimmunity. It's not been officially diagnosed by an endocrinologist, but I am on meds for hyperthyroidism, so to calm down the thyroid release. I have vitiligo, so my body's attacking its pigment cells. So there's a lot of this autoimmune response occurring in my body. And yeah, and I just want to know how other people are like working with it and dealing with it, other than just being on medication, or yeah, just trying to get like a little bit more broader understanding and knowledge from other people's experience. So like, well, what's kind of how did your journey start? Where does it start?
Yeah, so yeah, maybe let's start at the beginning, and I think it feels like we have to have a few episodes all about these various topics, because there are a few, but I think autoimmunity is such a powerful place to start, because it's so revealing about other issues that are underlying that, and in my experience and also what I've researched about it. So what happened for me was that I was kind of just going about my life, and I had these weird, I wouldn't say illnesses, but maybe just like weird things. Like sometimes I would have very little energy. Sometimes I would have digestive problems or skin problems. And that only came about, in my 20s. So as a teenager, I never had skin issues. I didn't have any kind of acne, like the teenage acne. I didn't go through any of that. However, in my 20s, and this is also after I started doing a lot of yoga, which was so disappointing for me because I thought, you know what, I'm really trying to look after my health, and I'm doing so much yoga and I'm trying to eat healthy. And, at a stage, I think I was also eating like very clean. Everybody has a different definition of clean, but I was eating my definition of clean that was provided to me or prescribed to me by my naturopath. So I was doing all of these different things, and all of a sudden, it's almost like, so what led up to it is like, I started to notice my weight fluctuating quite drastically. So I picked up a lot of weight, and I thought, okay, well, this is strange. Maybe I'm doing something incorrectly with my food. I was still like on the dealing with remnants of an eating disorder. So I thought, you know what, my body is just readjusting after this eating disorder. So I'm just going to see what happens and try my best to eat clean and eat healthy and do everything that my health practitioners tell me to do. And then it was actually when Anna Forrest was in South Africa, and she had her workshops. And I absolutely love Anna. She was like my complete idol at that stage. She has such a powerful story. I don't know if you've heard of the book or read her book, Fierce Medicine.
No, I've read it, yeah.
It is such a powerful healing manual, and I really resonated with her. So when she did workshops in South Africa, I was there. I was in every single workshop. And I remember doing one practice where my whole body just started shaking. And I was short of breath. I had chest pain. I just felt extremely disassociated from my body. And I didn't know what was going on. I just felt so weak, which is unlike me because I used to practice a lot and I used to feel extremely strong in my body. And then I started to notice like all of these different shifts. My mood would be so erratic. I would be extremely volatile. So I would be calm the one moment and then just feel a flash of heat move up my body and extreme anger. And also just mentally, I felt very disassociated, and I was starting to lose memory. I would look at people that I knew or taught for 2 years every single week, and I couldn't remember their name, which was a scary thing for me because I would look at them, I would see their face, and their name was just not there, even though I knew it. And other things started to happen, like with memory. I would leave my house and not know how to go back home because I didn't know the way home. I would just forget. But I was just kind of moving through this, and I thought, you know what, maybe I'm just tired, and I need rest. This is very weird. And in the meantime, when Anna was here, I applied for her teacher training, which was at that time in the States. So I applied for the visa. I took out a loan to do her teacher training, and I had everything. Everything was go. And I was so excited because I was going to finally train with this amazing mentor that I just looked up to. But these symptoms kept persevering, and I found myself in extreme pain. Like I had these intense headaches and terrible jaw clenching. and I wouldn't be able to walk from my lounge to my entrance door without lying down. And my resting heart rate at that stage was 120, which normally, because I was so fit, my resting heart rate was hanging around like the 50 mark. And so that was like over double. So I just felt like I was constantly in panic, constantly running. And I was so fortunate to go to this GP. And she just looked at me without even doing blood tests. And she said, you know what? My friend just had something so similar, and I think it's your thyroid. Let's test for it. Because I was to other doctors and they just couldn't figure out like what's really wrong with me. So she tested my thyroid. My thyroid came out to be very high. At that stage, you know, as I told you, I was picking up weight, and then I started losing weight, where I was every single day going down about 500 grams, a half a kilogram every single day. And I was just started to get very, very thin. And I used to eat. I used to eat so much, which was just so ridiculous to me. I think it was just like my dream come true, you know, coming from eating disorders and all the restriction, and now I'm like stuffing my face and losing weight. This was like I think the highlight of my whole sickness. If it wasn't for all the other symptoms, like I'll keep that. But no, it
isn't
wasn't
that
fun.
always a little bit of a bit of a thing? We kind of like we revel actually in our illness because it like seems to help us with I don't know, some
With
kind
weight
of
loss.
image. Exactly. That like feeling like we still want to be thin and skinny, or you know.
Exactly. Yeah, we have such a warped perception nowadays about, you know, but anyway, that's a topic for a different day. But yeah, so she was so helpful. And then after that, I had some more blood tests done, and it turned out that I had Graves' disease, which attacks the thyroid, and your thyroid overproduces the thyroid hormone, which increases your metabolism. And you know, when I was younger, or I didn't know about hormone problems, and I heard people talking about like hormone problems, I thought it was like, oh, it's so like whatever, hormone problems, you just take a pill or whatever, and it's not really influencing your life. Wow, it influences your whole life. And I think people who went through it can really, really resonate with that. And a lot of people don't. And I think you can feel so unseen and so like a hypochondriac because you really feel ill for so long. And sometimes you feel okay, and sometimes you don't feel okay. Sometimes you can eat an apple and feel okay, and sometimes it feels like somebody's sticking nails through your stomach, you know, which I wasn't aware of any of this, you know. So I thought it's like, oh, thyroid problems are just so mild, but the autoimmunity that comes with it just disrupts your whole system and your mental health. Yeah. So that was such a huge component to see how it disrupted my mental health. And so I thought, okay, let's work with this. And then I realized at that stage I wouldn't be able to do the training with Anna Forrest, unfortunately, because I was just not in a physically fit state to participate. So I would have to stay. But thank goodness that I actually had the loan, because I had to use so much of that money, actually all of that money, because I couldn't teach yoga anymore. I had no energy. I had to stop teaching for a while. I mean, I was in such a bad space that my whole body was in so much pain that I couldn't even do child's pose. I could do very, very little besides lie down. And still when I lie down, I was in tremendous pain. And I went to about 3 different endocrinologists, and they all told me pretty much the same thing. You either have to have an operation to cut out your thyroid, and we'll give you a thyroid pill to take for the rest of your life, or you have to swallow radioactive iodine, which will also kill off your thyroid, and then you'll have thyroid replacement. And they told me that autoimmune disease is something that cannot be cured, and you have to live with it for the rest of your life. What was really nice is that I visited one endocrinologist, and he said I appreciated him so much because he said, you know what, at this stage, I don't know how to heal this. If you can say to me, there is this amazing healer from Tibet that's going to come and heal you and, do it. Like if you believe in that and it's going to help you, do it. But at the moment, all I can tell you is that if you don't take this heart medication, you might have a heart attack. So this is what I can give you right now. These are your options. And this is what you have to do in the meantime until you figure out what else you want to do. So I really appreciated that because I felt like, just because the medical profession doesn't know how to heal this doesn't mean that it can't be healed. And I've read so many stories about people healing themselves from incurable diseases. So I thought, you know what? I wasn't born this way. And if this came about somehow, I need to be able to heal myself. So I had this determination inside of me, and I had to start taking allopathic medication for this because it was really influencing my life in a negative way in my body. So I started with that. And then the one day I was visiting the studio where I taught because I had to cancel all my classes. And a student came in and she said, "Where have you been?" She asked me what's been going on. And I told her exactly why I have just disappeared off the face of the earth. And she told me, "You know what? I know this doctor and he's helped my cousin, or it was her cousin or some kind of relative, to completely go into remission and heal this." And I mean, what a synchronicity that she was in the studio. There wasn't a class on. She just popped in to fetch something or drop off something. So it was such a big synchronicity that she came into the studio at the time when I was there. And then I went to see this doctor. And he wasn't cheap. so again, I was so glad to have that loan. I was on the one hand so disappointed because I couldn't do my training, but it was also actually such a blessing to have had that money because then I could use his method to recover. So one of those things was going to this doctor, and he also uses both allopathic medicines as well as supplements and other ways to heal you. So at first I had to be on some of the allopathic medication because it was quite strong and that's what I needed at that stage. And then he used supplements to help me out. So what he found was that H. pylori or Helicobacter pylori is behind a lot of autoimmune diseases. So I don't know if it's the same for vitiligo, but from what I understand, it is. So I know my mom's got vitiligo. So it's very similar condition, the autoimmune condition, which is all dealing with the gut, right? So when we have an autoimmune disease, we have to look at what is happening in the gut. And people often just give antibiotics for Helicobacter pylori, but antibiotics don't really work. And the Helicobacter then adapts to the antibiotics. Don't ask me how this works on a physiological level, but I know that it doesn't kill it completely. Mm-hmm. So I had to do various things and detoxes, and I had to go on a diet. The weirdest thing that happened when I was going through this is that I was not able to eat things like lettuce because my stomach just, is it the same for you?
Yeah.
It was so weird because I was completely vegan. I was eating high raw, and then I had to switch to a meat diet because I almost couldn't stomach any vegetables. I would be bent over in pain. And I see you shaking your head like in agreement, nodding your head. Yeah, did you also have to go through that?
Well, look, I was never, other than when I was doing my yoga teacher training, I've never really been, I was vegan for the period of my training, and then I was vegetarian for a while. But I've always been very, I mean, I crave meat, I miss meat. Veganism and vegetarianism wasn't really a lifestyle for me that I felt I could like sustain, because I have this very intense craving for meat. So I just do better on meat. I'm just, if I'm going to be physical, which is, my job as well, I have to be physical. I have to have, power in my body and in my muscles, then I need meat. So
Yeah, and it's so interesting how we're all so different, because I know so many people that are vegan and they just do so much better on the vegan or vegetarian diets. Once they cut out meat, they just thrive. And then other people who do really poorly. And it's so important to listen to the body, right? Because now I don't call myself vegan or vegetarian. I do mostly plant-based, but I am open to other things as well, which at that stage I wasn't. It was really difficult for me to get over that mindset of eating animal products again, because I was, conditioned to believe that this is really bad from all perspectives, whether it's ethical or health-wise or any other spiritual. So, but anyway,
that's
I mean,
sorry, that's quite a difficult. I think that's what sometimes keeps us stuck in a place, right? Because we have that like kind of almost sometimes just it can be more than ideological, but sometimes we have that like, we our identity or our idea about what life is and how life should be and what's sacred and what's important, can kind of push us into a place which actually starts to like box you into a space that's maybe not valuable. And I don't know if you found it. I also found I've come to terms a little bit more with the ebb and flow of life, because sometimes being more plant-based is better for me, and other time, in general, I'm a meat eater, but I can also tell when I'm starting to like it's too much, like there's too much excess anyway, and so it's about time to calm down. I mean, the interesting thing about the lettuce thing, I mean, I love vegetables and I love salad, but at some point I just could not eat any kind of salad. Couldn't eat carrots, couldn't eat greens, couldn't eat anything. I had to cook vegetables. Any vegetables I wanted had to be cooked, because I couldn't stomach them in any kind of raw way. It created too much pain in my digestive system as well. So I think, but that has subsequently also shifted again. And so the more I'm in ebb and flow with the more I'm in, and the more I listen, the better it is, because that can change. And if I'm not too stuck on any like, oh yes, I would like to be so-called ethically correct, or not take other lives, or whatever the case is, but also that, and that has helped to also change my perspective also on a lot of things, how I feel about things like hunting, that kind of thing. There's been a like quite a shift in how I've perceived things, and I am open to that shifting again.
And I think that's what happens, right? And I see a lot of us go through this. It's these illnesses or these transformational life experiences that help us to open and loosen this rigid mindset, like you say, about how life should be or how we should be. And it sounds like for you, it lessened this grip of judgment on yourself and everybody else and certain perspectives. And we're going a little bit off topic here, but when I sat in meditation in Vipassana, and I've noticed how the first form of violence is judgment, which happens internally. And that's when you sit in meditation for so many hours a day, and you can actually experience how your thoughts impact the body and how painful it is to carry judgment about anything. So I think, from my perspective, these type of situations come into our lives to really open us up and awaken us. And it's interesting because we practice yoga and all of these practices to transcend and perhaps transcend the ego. And then we create this other ego structure around it. So yeah, it's definitely an evolution. And I think to tie it all back in is like you say, we have these belief systems or these thought patterns, I started to notice how all of this plays together. I've always been very interested in psychosomatics. So how our thoughts affect the body, how the body affects our thoughts. And I thought, you know what? I am going to heal myself from this illness completely. And I found this big book. I think it's like Your Body and Your Mind. I can actually come back to you with exactly what it's called. But it's these two thick books about psychosomatic illnesses. Psychosomatics doesn't mean that it is not happening. I think for a prolonged period of time, the perception of psychosomatics illnesses in the public's eye was that it's just all in your head. It's not really, you're not really feeling it, you're just imagining it. It's not that. It's just the correlation with how your thoughts affect our body. And I think everybody in the world, I think it's common knowledge now that stress affects our body, right? Doctors will tell you this: high blood pressure, diabetes. At the root of most illnesses, we have some kind of stress. And a lot of illnesses can be linked to some kind of situation or a moment in your life where you were under a high period of stress. So I started to study about autoimmune, and that specific autoimmune, which is Graves' disease. And once I noticed the description in that book about what I was doing, my mind state, what I was missing out, or what I felt like I was missing out on, I started to live my life according to that. So kind of like in opposite direction. So if that book told me that I feel like I'm missing out on family connection, I went and I saw my family, which at that stage I haven't seen for, I think, 18 years.
Wow.
Because we moved when I was little. We moved to South Africa, and then I never went back. And then I went and I visited them, and I started to do all of these things that this book said I need to do. Basically, it didn't say a prescription, right? It just basically says that. And I think you're familiar with Louise Hay. A lot of people are familiar with Louise Hay. I'm sure the people who are listening to this are also familiar. You know, say, for example, lower back pain relates to financial support. You feel financially not supported. So basically to remedy that is to figure out, how can I be financially supported? How can I feel that in my life? So that's basically what I did. But Tony, to be honest with you, I did everything, you know, like I meditated, I went to see my family, I worked on all of those subconscious beliefs that were holding me back. And like I had people pray over me. Yeah, I did everything.
Yeah.
And then of course I also did the therapy with this amazing doctor, whose name I can also give you if you want. I don't know if we
Yes.
must mention names or not here.
Well, I think we can, and you know, people can.
So I went to Craig Golding, who's I think now in Houghton. So he was phenomenal. He's just got such an incredible knowledge about both the medical world and more the, I wouldn't even call it homeopathic, but maybe alternative medicine and rejuvenation medicine. And anti-aging medicine, which I always thought it was just about not aging or getting wrinkly, but I found out that it's all about rejuvenating the body. So he was phenomenal. So I did all of that in combination. So I don't believe that we heal the physical body through just the physical. We are whole beings. We need to look at the spirit. We need to look at our emotions. We need to look at our mind. We need to look at all of these different components that contributed to the illness, which sounds like it's quite a lot, but you know what, over a period of time, and it just and you kind of get guided towards people and situations, and there are synchronicities, and you happen upon things. You read an article, and then all of a sudden you'll find a practitioner that's going to help you with that particular problem or that particular aspect of your healing journey. So I did all of that. And I think the biggest thing was also just really eradicating H. pylori.
Okay.
That was a massive thing. And after that, I think it was from 2011 to 2013 so I healed for about 2 years where I was on these strict protocols, strict diet, no gluten, no dairy, food that I could basically stomach that wouldn't hurt me and which would change from morning to night to every single meal, which everybody thought, I'm very picky and I'm full of nonsense. I remember I went to visit my aunt and in Australia, and they just thought like I'm this princess because I'm like, no, I can't eat an apple. Now I'm going to eat an apple. No, now I need to eat a pork chop, or and then they're just like looking at me like, who is this person? Why is she such a princess? So I think this is the saddest thing that people really don't understand, because from the outside you look fine, and this is another symptom of people who have autoimmune disease. A lot of people who have autoimmune disease are hardcore people, basically. They don't faff around too much. They like, don't sit around and feel sorry for yourself. Put on a good face, put on a happy face, and just carry on with it. And all of that there are still stresses underneath the surface. And the interesting thing is that there's also this link between trauma and digestive problems and autoimmune disease, so it all ties in together. And this is why we need to look at life holistically. And once I did that, and I took some time off, I completely healed. So I went through complete remission. And sometimes now I'll go to a new doctor, and I'll tell them, what, I had Graves' disease. And they will look at me, because with Graves' disease, usually what you have is these protruding eyes. And they're like, you don't look like you had Graves' disease, or you're in remission. And they tell me, well, it's still somewhere in your system. And I say to them, no, it's not in my system. I had it, I healed through it, and I'm very, very assertive when it comes to that, because I know how powerful our thoughts are. And also, I don't want to work with doctors who believe that you cannot heal fully, So I'm very picky where it comes to who I'm working with, because when somebody tells you you can't heal from this, or you cannot do this, they are telling you that I don't know how to do it. Okay. And that's a completely different thing. I don't know how to do it, but that doesn't mean you cannot do it. Because Brandon Bayes healed himself from cancer. So many people heal themselves from all these incurable diseases. So nobody can tell you that you can't. and you can take your time.
With Graves, like how do you tell that you're in remission? Is it based on like blood work? Is it based on like
yeah, so I had blood work done. Yeah, and I have no signs of Graves in my system. I don't have H. pylori. I don't have any of the symptoms. Nothing.
Yeah. I mean, I've not been, like I say, officially diagnosed by an endocrinologist. I've worked with my homeopath slash functional medicine provider, and she's been working with my gut issues and stuff since pre-COVID days. But really, when this all came to a head for me was actually literally on the eve of the shutdown on COVID. I actually thought I had COVID because a client of mine had been tested positive for COVID, and she was quite ill from it right in the beginning days. And so I went off to the doctor. I had a bit of a sore throat and had all these other things happening. I'd also gone through that whole sort of weight loss, high metabolism, heart rate through the roof, can't breathe, can't catch my breath. It's all that we didn't know what was going on with COVID when it first started, but it really kind of like all just came crashing down. And I was trying to set up a new online business and run everything online. Meanwhile, I could barely talk enough towards the computer to, you know, whilst I'm busy doing up dogs and down dogs and all the rest, you know. And so I went to my GP, and he was just like, well, no, you've got thyroid issues. And I had hyper, which is also towards the Graves' end of the spectrum. Now the opinion really is that, and again, I haven't been officially diagnosed. I haven't had H. pylori checked, but that it's more towards the Hashimoto's side, so Hashimoto's thyroiditis. So that where everything's speeding up till it eventually burns out, and then you go into hypothyroidism, right? And then again, that sort of chronic med thing. And so I've just been working with my functional doctor as well, because through, you know, vitamin D, managing the gut as best I can, although I'm still doing a little bit way too much of this. So you know, the thing about H. pylori actually makes more sense, because I've had that innate sense of like, there is something I need to change.
Yeah.
I need to help it's not just taking the right supplements. I need to actually cleanse. It's like, I feel like I've got a parasite.
Yes. Yeah. You intuitively know you want to do all of these cleanses because you intuitively know that there is something there. And this is the interesting thing, because I feel like there is two components to this. I feel like there is this physical component of having this bacteria, and then this parasite, and then also there is this component of, I think, and I'm not going to speak for you, but I'm just saying overall how I perceive illness overall is when we feel like we have a parasite, there is something eating away at us.
Yeah.
So whether it was past stress, past trauma, something that you didn't forgive yourself for, you know, and again, this is just from my experience in research and intuitive wisdom, abuse, sexual abuse, all of that stuff, and then leads us to have this belief system that I am bad and there is something wrong with me. But there is something dark sitting inside of me. And it might not be those exact words for everybody, but it feels like there is this stain somewhere on my emotional body or on my soul, however people want to see it. Something has happened to me that I feel has stayed me. And also find that people who don't have good boundaries are more prone to having these type of parasitic infections, because it feels like the world is feeding off of you. Okay, narcissistic partners, narcissistic parents, or any type of experiences with narcissists, which are basically, sorry to say, these experiences of having parasitic people in your life feeding on your life force. So in the body, it also shows up as having these parasites. And I can completely relate to that feeling of like, I just need to get rid of this. And you naturally do cleanses. Yeah, I used to do a ton of cleanses. I don't feel like doing cleanses anymore, you know. A few years ago, I did a juice fast and it was fantastic. But I just don't feel like I just need to cleanse anymore, which is so interesting. And that comes from that reprogramming my subconscious mind from that belief that I'm bad or there's something wrong with me. And also healing a lot of the trauma. And yeah, so I think just coming to having more peace with food, basically.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but I'm just saying, you know, this is my experience, and I think everybody like who's going through the healing journey, like you're saying, needs to listen to themselves, right? Because internally, you already know, like something's going on. I need this cleanse, and that is motivating you. So I believe that we can look at each other's experiences and learn from it, but my healing experience from Graves might be very different to somebody else's experience from Graves. So this is not like a rule book of like, you know, follow these exact steps. But I think what you're saying is like tune into yourself, tune into your body, and listen to that intuition.
Yeah, for sure. I think, yeah, like you said, that's why I wanted to do this about, you know, your experience. I think experience has a lot to, people can learn from your experience, or at least get like put onto a different track, or a track you would not have maybe perceived or conceived of before, and might give you a different perspective. Oh, well, this is something to look into. And like you say, I think there's also, I suppose, if you looking for synchronicities as well, when you're speaking to certain people and something comes up and you're like, oh, that's an interesting thing. That might be the next thing to, take a journey on. And I suppose it's a journey. Like, I just feel like as I look back now, I mean, I've just literally had my 49th birthday. So I'm like in this like new phase of life. And of course, then
Birthday, wow.
you can kind of look back and start like sort of seeing more like patterns and the part of the journey. And, you have a little bit, I have a bit more, I can now talk in like decades of experience, what you've
Yeah.
obviously been
Yes, yes.
working through each decade, which you can only see when you look back a little bit,
In
and then you start to
retrospect,
see,
yeah.
yeah. Is that what moved you into your new, well, I call it new, maybe it's not so new for you, but like, what's it, your Love and Thrive?
My
What's
Love
your,
and Thrive School.
yeah.
Yeah, so you know what? I think it's been a evolution from yoga. I absolutely love yoga and I love teaching yoga. But I just found that there were certain things that I couldn't fully heal with my meditation practice, yoga, therapy. There was just something missing for me. And maybe this is a topic for another discussion, because I know this is almost like an hour long. So I don't know if people have that much time to listen. But yeah, basically I was trying to heal from my childhood trauma, which is all relational. And I've noticed that no matter how much yoga or meditation or therapy or other modalities I did, certain things were just not shifting for me. So I started studying about relationships and specifically attachment theory, and looking at how our childhood development affects us in adult relationships specifically. I think we all can understand the link between, our childhood and adult life, but there are these specific um, traits and characteristics and groups of people that behave in certain ways because they have been brought up in certain situations and circumstances, which was revolutionary for me because I started to heal my childhood trauma in a way where I don't have to deal with it every single day. I think a lot of people think that if you have PTSD, if you have trauma, it's something that you manage for the rest of your life. And I'm not into managing. Like, I think everybody can hear that I'm not into managing things. Like, I want to thrive in my life. This is my goal, and I think I have this incredible determination, inside of me. And it's a little bit of like rebellious and fiery. And I think it's been very helpful on my healing journey because I just haven't, um, agreed to anybody else's opinion. I always questioned everybody else's opinion, even doctors' opinions. I would go to the doctors, I would research it online, and also just use my common sense. Like, does this make sense to me? Because I think we are so conditioned to just believe authority figures.
Mm.
So I think this type of mindset really helped me to shift and heal from so much, like physically, and emotionally, and help me to come to a place where I can heal that childhood trauma so it's not with me every single day. It's not influencing my relationships, and it's not something I'm managing. And what we get after healing all this trauma is that we get love, safety, and freedom and thriving, and this is why I've created the Love and Thrive School, is because I want to help people heal, because I've also had chronic back pain for 4.5 years, and I've healed that also through psychosomatics, after having done everything to heal it, seeing all the specialists. So, my school is still a baby school. I started it in January this year, 2023. So it's still going to grow and expand. And I've got really nice big plans for it because I want to lead people who have had experience trauma or illness or heartache to thrive. So, I love that. My one of my sayings is from surviving to thriving. It's how do you overcome and not just cope with life, but how do you truly thrive in your life every single day? So that's the goal.
Amazing. Yeah. Because I think that's I think quite a it really again the picture that it shows me is that, again, I think initially when the physical body starts throwing stuff back up at you, it's so that you can really start to go in and start redefining, or more appropriately defining, your relationship to self. And so that primary relationship is that self relationship. And then,
Wow.
of course, once you've cultivated a better self relationship and relationship to self, then you can start to and need to then also look at, well, then how do you now relate out externally to the world around you? I think we usually like on the other way around, right? We're normally always looking to the external. The parents are, your parents are the authority figures and that guide what should happen. And then we maybe eventually start to actually really come of age where we come back into the self and actually come back to that truth. But then you still do have those external relationships and how you relate externally as well to also heal, to fill out that, like you say, a greater level of healing.
Yeah, and you just triggered my mind with my memory or something, it's like what you say is a relationship to self and psychosomatics and how it all relates in this big package is, if we look at autoimmune disease, right, it's your own system's defense system attacking itself. Okay, so when we have thoughts of self-judgment and self-criticism, this is basically what we are doing, is we are attacking ourselves. Thyroid, it's the throat, a center of self-expression. Like, what am I not expressing? Related to the gut, right, where we process all our emotions. So, and a lot of the autoimmune diseases, there is inflammation. So wherever there is inflammation, there is some kind of anger, frustration, which anger is another emotion that indicates that we are not setting boundaries verbally. So, maybe just to wrap this up, I think we can leave it there with like the ending of the psychosomatics and how it all ties together.
Yeah, cool. Yeah, no, great. Thank you. Yeah, it's been great to also hear someone else's experience, because I really feel, again, when I hear someone else's journey, I can see the parallels, and I can also see it then from not a better perspective, a different perspective, that external, giving me a little bit of space to go like, right, yeah. And also some reassurance that actually you are on the right track sometimes, actually what's going on inside. It's just, I don't think, like, I know for myself, I was definitely very much taught not to, I had to bow down to someone else's authority all the time. So I was taught not to trust my intuition. I was not okay to be myself. It's not okay to be in the world. It's not okay to be myself. And so that becomes completely internalized, and like you say, then starts attacking. And I was often like, how is this, the vitiligo particularly, I'm attacking my own boundaries. I'm not actually holding
the essence.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah, so interesting.
Yeah, great. Thanks for sharing. I want to know about those 2 books you mentioned as well. If you maybe you can text me or send me the name of those books.
Yeah, we've just moved, so I think it's all in storage, but as soon as I get them out, I will let you know.
Well, thanks for taking time in amongst the settling process.
Perfect. Thank you so much. I really enjoyed this. This was amazing.